In the shadowed realm of Elyndor, where the veil between light and darkness thinned like fragile silk, Elara Voss stood at the edge of the whispering forest. The ancient trees loomed like silent guardians, their twisted branches reaching toward the heavens as if pleading for mercy from the twin moons that hung low in the sky. Their bark, etched with glowing runes that pulsed faintly like dying embers, whispered secrets to those who dared listen. Elara had learned long ago not to heed their murmurs. They were tricks of the night, illusions spun by the very shadows she hunted. The chill wind carried the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, seeping through her leather armor and into her bones. She gripped her bow tightly, the polished wood familiar and reassuring under her calloused fingers. The string was taut, ready to sing its deadly song at a moment's notice. Her breath came in steady, controlled puffs, visible in the crisp air, a testament to her unyielding resolve. Elara was no fragile flower. She was forged in the fires of loss and tempered by endless patrols along this forsaken border. As a huntress of the sunlit clans, Elara had spent years warding off the encroaching shadows that spilled like ink from the kingdom of Nocturne. The Nocturnals, ethereal beings born of night and woven from pure magic, were her people's ancient foes. They moved like ghosts, their whispers promising eternal darkness and untold power to those weak enough to listen. Villages on the fringe had fallen to their seduction, entire families vanishing into the mist, leaving behind only echoes of regret. Elara knew the cost all too well. Her mother, once a revered healer of the clans, had succumbed to those honeyed lies one fateful night. She had slipped into the forest under the cover of darkness, drawn by visions of forbidden knowledge that the rigid traditions of the sunlit clans could never provide. Elara, then just a girl of 12, had watched from the window of their modest hut, her heart shattering as the shadows swallowed her whole. That scar ran deep, fueling a vow of vengeance that burned brighter than any sun rune on her armor. Tonight, the air hummed with an unnatural energy, thicker and more oppressive than usual. It vibrated against her skin like the strings of an unseen harp, setting her nerves on edge. A storm brewed on the distant horizon, its thunderous growl rolling across the land like a warning from the gods. Lightning fractured the sky in jagged veins, illuminating the tree line in stark, fleeting bursts. Elara's emerald eyes, sharp as a hawk's, scanned the underbrush, her long auburn hair whipping widely in the gusts. Strands escaped her practical braid, framing a face marked by determination and faint lines of exhaustion. She wore her battle-worn leather armor, etched with intricate solar runes that glowed with a warm, golden light, wards against the dark. A dagger, its hilt wrapped in sun-bleached leather, was strapped securely to her thigh, its blade honed to a razor's edge. She was ready for beasts, for shadows, for anything that dared cross into her territory and threaten the fragile peace her people clung to. The forest seemed alive, its leaves rustling in a rhythm that mimicked hushed conversations. Elara's instincts screamed that something was amiss. She had felt this before, the subtle shift in the veil, like a tear in fabric that grew wider with each passing hour. Whispers from the elders spoke of ancient prophecies, of a void that hungered for all light and shadow alike. But Elara pushed those thoughts aside. Prophecies were for dreamers, and she was a warrior. A sudden rustle pierced the tension, sharper than the wind's howl. Without hesitation, Elara's arrow flew from her bow, embedding deep into the trunk of a gnarled oak with a satisfying thud. Wood splintered, and from the encroaching darkness emerged a figure, not the snarling beast she expected, but a man. He stepped into the moonlight with an effortless grace that belied the power radiating from him. Tall and imposing, he was cloaked in midnight velvet that seemed to absorb the very light around it, making the edges of his form blur into the night. His skin was pale as polished moonstone, flawless and almost luminous under the twin moons. A cascade of raven waves framed his sharp, aristocratic features, high cheekbones, a strong jaw, and lips curved in perpetual intrigue. But it was his eyes that halted her breath, silver orbs swirling with shadows, like storm clouds trapped in eternal glass, holding depths that could drown the unwary. He regarded her with a tilt of his head, unfazed by the arrow that had missed him by inches. "You shoot first and question later, huntress?" His voice was a rich timbre, velvet draped over sharpened steel, laced with an amusement that ignited a spark of fury in her chest. It resonated through the air, wrapping around her like a silken thread. Elara didn't flinch. She narked another arrow swiftly, her movements fluid from years of practice. Her heart pounded, but her aim remained steady. Cross the border again, Nocturnal, and my next shot won't miss. This land belongs to the light, your darkness has no place here. He stepped forward, unperturbed, the air around him shimmering with tendrils of dark magic that danced like smoke. The runes on her armor flared brighter in response, a silent warning. I am no mere Nocturnal, he replied, his tone carrying the weight of command. I am King Thorne Valtor, ruler of the shadows you so fear. He tilted his head slightly, that infuriating smirk playing on his lips as if he found her defiance entertaining. And you are the one they call the sun's fury. Elara Voss. Your reputation precedes you, fierce, unyielding, a thorn in the side of my kingdom. Her heart stuttered in her chest, a rare crack in her composure. How did he know her name? Whispers of spies in the clans had circulated, but to hear it from his lips felt like a violation. She tightened her grip on the bow, refusing to let surprise show on her face. What do you want, Shadow King? Your kind isn't welcome here. Turn back, or face the consequences. Thorne's gaze lingered on her, intense and unyielding, as if he could see through her armor to the vulnerabilities beneath. It sent an unwelcome shiver down her spine, not entirely from fear. There was something magnetic about him, a pull that clashed with everything she believed. A truce, he said simply, his voice dropping to a grave timbre. The veil is tearing, huntress. Ancient forces awaken, forces far older than our enmity. The void stirs, a hunger that threatens to consume both our realms. Light and shadow must unite, or all will fall into oblivion. Elara laughed bitterly, the sound echoing harshly through the trees. It was a mask for the unease his words stirred. She had seen the signs, the unnatural fogs, the withered crops, the whispers that grew louder each night. But trust a Nocturnal? Never. Unite? With the monsters who stole my mother? Who lure the innocent with lies and leave nothing but ruins? I'd sooner burn your kingdom to ash than ally with you. His expression darkened, shadows coiling at his feet like living serpents, writhing in response to his rising emotion. The air grew heavier, charged with his power. Your mother came willingly, he countered, his voice low and edged with something raw. She sought power that the sunlit clans, with their rigid ways, denied her. She chose the night, Lara. Not because we forced her, but because she yearned for more. Liar. The word exploded from her lips, fueled by years of pent-up rage. She released her arrow, the shaft whistling through the air. It grazed his cheek, drawing a thin line of midnight blood that sparkled like scattered stars under the moonlight. The wound was superficial, but the audacity of it hung between them like a challenge. Thorne touched the cut gingerly, his silver eyes flashing with a primal fire, anger, yes, but laced with an undeniable spark of desire that made her stomach twist. He didn't flinch, instead, he met her gaze with an intensity that pinned her in place. You dare strike a king? His voice was a growl now, shadows thickening around him. Very well, little sunling. If war is what you crave, I'll give it to you. But remember this, the line between hate and something far more dangerous is thinner than your veil. In a blur of swirling shadow, he vanished, dissolving into the night like mist before the dawn. The wind carried his final words, faint but insistent, you cannot escape what fate has woven. Elara lowered her bow slowly, her pulse racing like a wild stallion. Her hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the storm of emotions churning within. She had just declared war on the Shadow King himself, a move that could doom her clan. Yet, deep down, buried beneath layers of vengeance and duty, a forbidden spark ignited. Curiosity, sharp and insistent, laced with something dangerously close to attraction. Who was this king who knew her name, who spoke of prophecies with such conviction? And why did his eyes linger in her mind like a haunting melody? As the storm broke overhead, rain beginning to patter against the leaves, Lara turned back toward her village. The path ahead was fraught with peril, but for the first time, she wondered if the true danger lay not in the shadows, but in the light of her own unraveling heart. Elara stumbled back from the dissipating shadows, her palm still tingling where it had pressed against Thorne's chest. The glade felt suddenly too quiet, the night air thick with the lingering scent of midnight jasmine. She pressed her fingers to her lips, as if to silence the echo of his whispered promise, "You'll beg for my touch." No. She would not. She extinguished the light runes with a sharp gesture, scattering them like dying embers. The portal had closed, but the wound it had torn in the veil remained, a faint, pulsing scar in the air that hummed with wrongness. She could feel it pulling at her solar magic, siphoning warmth into nothingness. By the time she returned to the village, the first hints of dawn bled across the horizon, gilding the sunstone huts in rose and gold. The clan was already stirring, solar guardians patrolled the perimeter, their spears tipped with crystallized sunlight. Elara slipped past them, heart hammering, and barricaded herself in her small hut. Sleep evaded her. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her mother, young, radiant, wrapped in Thorne's arms beneath a canopy of starlit shadows. Laughing. Willing. Loved. And then devoured by the void. Elara sat up, clutching the ancient tome her mother had hidden beneath the floorboards years ago. Its leather cover was embossed with both solar sigils and nocturnal crescents, an impossible fusion that the elders would have burned on sight. She had always assumed it was a relic of her mother's scholarly curiosity. Now she knew better. She opened it with trembling fingers. The pages whispered as they turned, inked in languages that shifted when stared at too long. Toward the back, she found the prophecy Thorne had referenced, written in her mother's elegant hand. When the veil frays and the void hungers, a daughter of sun and a son of night shall bind in blood and shadow bright. One heart, one flesh, one soul entwined, or all realms fall to the endless blind. Below the verse, a marginal note in fresher ink, he is not the monster they claim. Trust the bond. Forgive me, my starlight. Elara's throat tightened. Forgive her for what? For loving the enemy? For leaving her daughter to clean up the wreckage of a doomed romance? A knock sounded at her door, sharp, insistent. Elara. Elder Myra's voice carried the weight of authority. The council demands your presence. Now. She barely had time to hide the tome before the door swung open. Two guardians flanked Myra, their faces grim. The rifts have worsened overnight, Myra said without preamble. 3 meadows to the east are gone. Drained to ash. And scouts report nocturnal spies at our borders. Elara's stomach dropped. Thorne's people? Or something worse? I must speak to the council alone, she said, straightening her shoulders. Myra's eyes narrowed. You met with their king. Alone. Some say you returned, changed. Changed? Yes. She could still feel the cool imprint of Thorne's presence beneath her skin, like frost on summer glass. The council chamber was a dome of polished sunstone that amplified daylight into blinding radiance. 7 elders sat in a semicircle, their solar crowns blazing. Elara stood at the center, enduring their scrutiny. You claim the Shadow King wants alliance, Elder Thorne, no relation, thank the stars, said coldly. Yet our lands wither faster since your meeting. I believe he spoke truth, Elara said. There's a greater threat, the void. It's not nocturnal magic draining us. It's something older. Hungrier. Mutterings erupted. Blasphemy. She's been corrupted. Elder Myra raised a hand for silence. If the Nocturnals truly wished alliance, why do their spies skulk at our borders? Because we refuse to listen, Elara countered. Because we meet every overture with arrows and fire. And what would you have us do? Another elder snapped. Invite their king to sup at our tables? Bed in our huts? Heat flared in Elara's cheeks, but she held her ground. I would have us hear him out. Under truce. The chamber fell silent. Finally, Myra spoke. Very well. One chance. You will return to the border at dusk. If the Shadow King appears and swears truce upon the ancient stones, we will parley. But if this is treachery... Her gaze hardened. You will bear the consequences, Elara. Blood for blood. Dismissed, Elara spent the day preparing. She bathed in sacred springs, braided protective runes into her golden hair, and donned armor of flexible sun-forged scales that drank in light and threw it back as weapon. Beneath it all, she wore the small pendant her mother had left her, a teardrop of solidified shadow encased in solar crystal. A gift from Thorne, perhaps. Dusk painted the sky in bruised purples when she reached the border, a jagged line where golden meadows gave way to perpetual twilight forests. Ancient truce stones, neutral monoliths older than either clan, stood in a solemn ring. She waited alone. The guardians watched from a distance, arrows narked. Minutes stretched into hours. Doubt crept in. Had Thorne lied? Was this all some elaborate trap? Then the shadows between the trees thickened, coalescing into his form. He stepped into the ring of stones wearing no armor, only a sleeveless tunic of black silk that revealed the corded strength of his arms, marked with swirling nocturnal tattoos that seemed to move when caught in the fading light. His silver hair was unbound tonight, stirring in an unfelt breeze. You came, Elara said, hating how breathless she sounded. I gave my word. His gaze swept over her armor, lingering. Though I prefer you without all that metal between us. She ignored the heat his words sparked. Swear the truce. Upon the stones. Thorne placed one palm against the nearest monolith. Darkness bled from his hand into the stone, mingling with its neutral grey until it glowed faintly violet. I, Thorne Vesper, King of Nocturne, swear truce upon these ancient stones. No blade drawn, no spell cast in harm, until talks conclude or one side breaks faith. The stone pulsed once, accepting the oath. From the meadows, Elara heard the guardians lower their bows slightly. Your turn, Thorne said softly. Elara pressed her palm to the same stone. Solar warmth flowed into it, turning the violet glow to soft rose gold. I, Elara, speak for the Sun Clan under elder authority. I swear the same. The stone sealed their pact with a sound like distant thunder. Only then did Thorne step closer, close enough that the conflicting auras of their magic crackled between them, sunfire kissing shadow. Your elders hide behind arrows, he observed. Afraid. Wary, she corrected. As they should be. Now speak your proposal. He tilted his head. So formal, little son. Very well. His voice deepened, losing its teasing edge. The void awakens. It feeds on division, on the hatred between our kinds that keeps the veil weak. Alone, neither sun nor shadow can seal it. Together we bind, she finished quietly. The prophecy's words tasted like ash. His eyes flared bright silver. You read it. My mother's handwriting. Pain flickered across his face, quickly masked. Then you know what is required. Not mere alliance of clans. Union of bloodlines. You and I. The air left her lungs. A political marriage? More than political. He reached out slowly, giving her time to retreat, and brushed a stray lock of hair from her cheek. His touch was cool silk. Fated. The magic demands true consent, Elara. Willing hearts. Willing bodies. Her pulse thundered in her ears. And if I refuse? Then the void consumes everything. Your meadows. My twilight forests. The stars themselves. His thumb traced her lower lip, featherlight. But I don't think you'll refuse forever. Arrogant bastard. She caught his wrist, intending to push him away, but her fingers curled instead, holding him there. The contact sent sparks racing up her arm, pleasure laced with pain, light and dark twining. From the meadow's edge, Elder Myra's voice carried sharply. Enough whispers. State your terms clearly, Shadow King, or this truce ends now. Thorne's lips curved, but he stepped back, breaking the contact. Elara felt the loss like a physical ache. My terms are simple, he called, voice ringing clear. A hand fasting between our heirs, Elara and myself. 1 year and 1 day. During that time, our clans cease all hostility. We combine magics to locate and seal the void's primary rift. If at the end we cannot. He glanced at Elara, something raw in his expression. If the binding fails, the hand fasting dissolves. No war. No retribution. Silence stretched. Elara could feel the elder's stares boring into her back. Finally, Myra spoke. We will consider. Return at tomorrow's dusk for our answer. Thorne inclined his head. But before dissolving into shadow, he caught Elara's gaze one last time. Tomorrow, then, he murmured, for her ears alone. Dream of me, little son. I'll be dreaming of you. Then he was gone. Elara stood frozen beneath the rising moon, her skin still burning where he'd touched her, wondering how she would survive a year and a day bound to the enemy who felt less like foe and more like the missing half of her soul. And wondering, with a traitorous thrill, what tomorrow's answer would be. Elara stood frozen beneath the rising moon, her skin still burning where he'd touched her, wondering how she would survive a year and a day bound to the enemy who felt less like foe and more like the missing half of her soul. And wondering, with a traitorous thrill, what tomorrow's answer would be. The council deliberated through the night and into the grey hours before dawn. Elara was not invited. She paced the meadows alone, watching the first rifts of pale light stitch themselves across the sky, feeling the veil quiver like a wounded animal. When Elder Myra finally summoned her, the woman's face was carved from stone. We have decided, Myra said, the other elders arrayed behind her like silent sentinels. The Sun clan will not bend to nocturnal demands. There will be no hand fasting. No union. We reject the Shadow King's terms. Elara's heart plummeted. You can't. We can, Myra cut in, voice sharp as sun-disk blades. And we have. The Nocturnals want our princess as broodmare for their king? Let them come and try to take her. We will meet treachery with fire. It was not treachery, Elara wanted to scream. It was the only path left. But the words died in her throat. The elder's fear had calcified into certainty, nothing she said now would sway them. Prepare the borders, Myra commanded the gathered warriors. War is upon us. War came swiftly. The first raid struck 3 nights later, under a moonless sky. Nocturnal assassins slipped through the weakened veil like smoke through cracks, their blades coated in shadow venom that withered flesh on contact. Sun Clan scouts fell silently, meadows that had bloomed eternal gold turned brittle and grey overnight. Elara led the counterstrikes. She stood at the forefront of every defense, her bow singing with solar arrows that burned through darkness. Her warriors followed her without question, inspired by the fierce light in her eyes and the way she never flinched from the front line. But in every clash, she felt him. Thorne. He was never far. She would glimpse him across the battlefield, tall and implacable, silver hair whipping in an unnatural wind, commanding his forces with economical gestures. Yet his shadow barriers always curved protectively around her position. His warriors' strikes always fell short of where she fought. Once, a nocturnal spear meant for her heart veered at the last moment, dissolving into harmless mist. He was protecting her. And it infuriated her. Days bled into weeks. The borders shrank. Golden meadows surrendered acre by acre to creeping twilight. The rifts multiplied, vomiting void-touched beasts, eyeless things with too many mouths that drained light and life alike. Both sides lost ground to the greater hunger, yet neither would yield. Elara's body bore the cost. Scratches from shadow claws that refused to heal cleanly. Bruises blooming beneath her armor like storm clouds. Exhaustion that sleep could not touch. One dawn, after a night of relentless fighting, she staggered back to camp with the remnants of her company. The battle had been brutal, void wraiths summoned by the widening rifts had torn through both sun and shadow lines indiscriminately. She had held the center until her voice was hoarse from shouting commands, until her arms trembled from drawing her bow. In her tent, she peeled away blood-stiffened armor with shaking fingers. The worst wound was a long gash across her ribs, courtesy of a wraith's claw. It burned with unnatural cold, resisting the healing salves her attendants pressed upon her. "Leave me," she ordered them hoarsely. "I will tend it myself." They obeyed, faces drawn with worry. Alone, Elara collapsed onto her pallet, breath ragged. The tent flaps were tied shut, dawnlight seeping weakly through the sunstone fabric. She closed her eyes, willing unconsciousness to claim her. A whisper stirred the air, cool as midnight breeze. "Let me heal you." Her eyes snapped open. Thorne knelt beside her, battle-worn and disheveled, his tunic torn and blooded, silver hair falling across a fresh cut above his brow. He looked as weary as she felt, yet his presence filled the small space like gathering storm clouds. "How did you?" she began, pushing up on one elbow despite the flare of pain. "Shadows find paths where light cannot," he said quietly. His gaze dropped to her wound, expression darkening. "This festers with void taint. Your healers cannot touch it." She covered the gash instinctively. "I will manage." "You will not." He shifted closer, knees sinking into the furs. "Let me." She should have called the guards. Should have reached for her dagger. Instead, exhaustion and something deeper stayed her hand. "Why do you keep sparing me?" she whispered. His hands hovered over her ribs, dark energy coiling like living smoke between his palms. "Because losing you would break something in me the void could never reach." The confession hung raw between them. He pressed his palms gently to her skin. Shadow magic flowed, cool at first, stinging, then soothing as it chased away the unnatural chill. Pain ebbed, replaced by spreading warmth that raced through her veins and settled heavy in her core. Awareness crackled sharply, the air grew thick with his scent of midnight jasmine and storm. "Why protect me?" she asked again, voice softer, "when my clan spat on your offer?" Silver eyes lifted to hers, fierce with possession and pain. "Because you are mine," he growled low. "Even if you deny it. Even if your elders choose destruction over destiny." The wound sealed beneath his touch. His hands lingered, thumbs tracing slow, deliberate circles over healed skin, raising gooseflesh in their wake. Weeks of war, grief, and denied longing rose like a tide. Elara's restraint shattered. She surged forward, fingers tangling in his torn collar, and pulled him down into a fierce kiss. It was fire meeting ice, desperate, consuming. His mouth claimed hers with the same intensity she offered, cool and addictive, tasting of shadows and unspoken promises. One hand cradled the back of her head, the other steadied at her waist, pulling her closer until no space remained between battle-hardened bodies. She arched into him, heat flaring everywhere they touched. The kiss deepened, weeks of tension unraveling in gasps and whispered names. But dawn voices rose outside the tent, guards changing watch, warriors stirring. Reality crashed in. Elara tore away, chest heaving, lips swollen. "This changes nothing," she said, voice trembling. "We are still enemies." Thorne rose slowly, shadows swirling restlessly around him. His eyes blazed, his mouth curved in a dangerous, knowing smile. "Oh, Sunling," he murmured, voice husky. "It changes everything." He dissolved into darkness, leaving only the lingering coolness of his presence and the thunder of her heart. Elara fell back against the furs, fingers brushing her lips, desire and duty warring within her. Outside, the camp awakened to another day of war. But inside, something new burned, hotter than solar fire, deeper than nocturnal dark. And she knew neither side would emerge unchanged. Elara fell back against the furs, fingers brushing her lips, desire and duty warring within her. Outside, the camp awakened to another day of war. But inside, something new burned, hotter than solar fire, deeper than nocturnal dark. And she knew neither side would emerge unchanged. The war granted no reprieve for stolen moments. It only grew hungrier. The void's rifts widened into gaping wounds that devoured entire villages overnight. Golden meadows turned to ash, perpetual twilight crept inward with relentless patience. Warriors of sun and shadow no longer fought only each other, they battled a greater nothingness that spared no allegiance. The Sun Clan stood on the precipice of collapse. Sunstone huts cracked. Eternal blooms withered. Elder defiance had curdled into desperation. Elara carried the weight alone. She led every defense until her hands blistered on her bow and her voice frayed from command. Then came the night Solhaven fell, the village of her childhood, swallowed without warning. One moment it stood beneath starlight. The next, only a perfect circle of absence remained. That night, something inside her broke beyond repair. Under deepest dark, she left the camp without farewell. She crossed the whispering forest alone and stepped fully into Nocturne for the first time. The realm stole her breath. Obsidian towers rose beneath an indigo sky scattered with endless stars. Streets shimmered with living shadow and gentle light, neither hostile nor welcoming, simply watching. Night-blooming flora glowed softly, alive in ways her fading homeland no longer was. She was escorted in silence to the palace at the city's heart. Thorne waited in the throne room of shadowglass and starlight. He rose the instant she entered. "You came," he said, voice rough with disbelief. "The void took Solhaven," Lara replied. "Everything I was began there. Everything is gone." Thorne descended the dais slowly. Up close, the war had marked him as deeply as it had her. "I felt the tear," he said quietly. It screamed across the veil. Elara met his gaze. "We were wrong. Division feeds the hunger. The binding, our union, it must happen now." For a long moment, Thorne simply looked at her. Then he bowed his head. "You come of your own will." "Yes." He reached out, not to claim, but to steady. Their palms met, light and shadow responding instantly, weaving together in calm resonance rather than fire. He led her to the binding chamber. It was a vast circular sanctuary, open to the stars. At its center stood an ancient altar, sunstone and shadowglass fused in perfect equilibrium. Orbs of pure light and pure dark revolved slowly above it, waiting. "This ritual demands truth," Thorne said. "No armor. No barriers. Only intent." Elara nodded. She set aside her weapons and armor, standing unguarded beneath the heavens. Thorne did the same. They faced one another not as enemies, not as rulers, but as two souls choosing the same fate. "Do you accept me?" Thorne asked, "shadow and all?" "I do." "And you accept me?" Elara said, voice steady, light and all. "I do." The chamber answered. The orbiting orbs flared, spiraling faster. Energy surged, not violent, not consuming, but fast and purposeful. Light threaded into shadow, shadow curved protectively around light. They stood together at the altar as the magic rose, hands clasped, hearts aligned. Power poured through them, ancient, balanced, complete. Across Elyndor, rifts sealed. The void recoiled, its distant hunger collapsing into silence as the veil stitched itself whole. Meadows bloomed. Twilight softened. The sky itself seemed to breathe again. When the light faded, Elara realized she was shaking. Thorne steadied her, resting his forehead against hers. "It holds," he murmured. "Because we chose it together." She closed her eyes, feeling the truth settle into her bones. "Because we chose each other." Beyond the chamber, Nocturne's eternal dusk shifted. The first true dawn in centuries brushed the horizon. Two former enemies stood bound by trust, not conquest, sun and shadow balanced at last, while the wounded world began to heal. Elara clung to Thorne through the aftershocks, tears of completion on her cheeks. He held her tightly, face buried in her hair. "It's done," he whispered, voice thick. "The seal holds, because you chose me." She pressed closer, feeling their mingled magic settle eternally into her bones. "And you chose me." Outside, Nocturne's eternal twilight softened, first true dawn in centuries brushing the horizon. Inside the chamber, two former enemies, now bound beyond undoing, remained entwined, hearts beating in perfect unison, while the wounded world began, slowly, to heal. They did not emerge for a full day and night, lost in the sacred aftermath, whispering vows between lingering kisses, tracing new golden threads now woven through nocturnal tattoos, discovering the infinite language of their completed bond. When at last hunger and duty called, Thorne carried her to his private chambers where discreet servants had left trays of night fruit and star wine. They fed each other beneath soft candle glow, laughing quietly at shared sweetness, joyously rediscovering one another in peace. Finally, hand in hand, they stepped onto the grand palace balcony as true dawn painted the sky rose and violet, the first in Nocturne's long history. Below, thousands of Nocturnals gathered in awed silence. Word had already crossed the restored Vale, rifts closing, meadows blooming anew, the void defeated. When Elara and Thorne appeared together, her hair braided with living shadow, his tattoos glowing with threads of sunlight, the silence broke into thunderous acclaim that shook the spires. They were no longer princess and king of warring realms. They were the dawn sovereigns of united Elyndor. In the months that followed, Elara stood beside Thorne as Sun Clan delegations arrived, Elder Myra among them, stern face softening at the sight of healed lands visible beyond former borders. Truces became treaties, borders dissolved entirely. Warriors trained side by side, children of sun and shadow played together beneath skies where daylight and twilight danced in eternal balance. One quiet evening, they returned to that same balcony. The heavens above blended sunset embers with emerging stars, perfect harmony. Elara rested her head against Thorne's shoulder, fingers laced with his. "I thought I hated you," she confessed softly, words carried on warm night air. "You were the monster in every story of my childhood." He turned, brushing a kiss to her forehead. "And I thought you an unreachable star, beautiful, fierce, forever beyond my night." His smile warmed the darkness. "Yet hate and love are merely shadows of the same eternal flame, my son." She lifted her face to his kiss, slow, deep, tasting of endless tomorrows. Together they ruled with wisdom and compassion, courts held in halls of fused sunstone and shadow glass, festivals honoring both solstice and equinox, magic shared without fear. In quiet nights, when the palace slept and stars kept watch, they celebrated their bond beneath silken sheets, whispers and caresses igniting the same magic that had saved the world, leaving them breathless and laughing in each other's arms. Elara would smile into the dark, tracing golden veins now permanent in his tattoos, feeling their shared power hum contentedly. Fate had not merely saved Elyndor. It had woven them perfectly, sun and shadow, fire and night, two halves of one boundless dawn. The end. Sequel teaser, but peace is fragile. When an ancient rival, older than the void itself, stirs in forgotten depths, drawn by the radiant power of their union, it will test every thread of their bond. Old secrets will rise. Loyalties will fracture. And some shadows refuse to stay sealed forever. Subscribe for part 2.